The galaxy was quiet, peaceful, and full of life. Across millions of stars, different alien species lived in harmony. The Zorveni Empire ruled over many planets and had the largest fleet in the galaxy. Their ships were powerful, their armies unstoppable. They had conquered many worlds, and their empire seemed untouchable. No one ever doubted their strength. They were the top dogs in the galaxy, and they liked it that way. In the heart of this mighty empire, the Zorveni leaders looked down on Earth. They thought it was just a backwater planet, full of weak creatures who had no place in the galaxy's grand story. Earth had no advanced technology, no space fleets, and no mighty armies. The humans were nothing more than a story told by travelers. A myth. The Zorveni never even bothered to look closely at the planet. It was forgotten, just another small dot in a vast galaxy. But the truth was different. Far away on Earth, a quiet storm was brewing. Humans had been living for centuries, and while the galaxy saw them as weak, they were far from it. They had survived countless challenges, learned from their mistakes, and grown stronger with each passing year. They were not ready to take over the galaxy, but they were not as helpless as the Zorveni thought. For the most part, the humans were focused on their own lives. They built cities, studied the stars, and dreamed of what lay beyond their world. They had no idea the galaxy was watching them. Most people didn't even know there were other species out there, much less that some were already planning to destroy them. Humans lived simple lives, unaware that their world was about to become a battlefield. The galaxy's leaders had no reason to fear Earth. The peacefulness of the galaxy was a blessing, and no one expected that anything would change. But deep inside, a few aliens began to wonder about the humans. There were rumors, whispers in the dark corners of the galaxy, about a species that was different, about a species that didn't give up easily, about a species that could survive anything. But these were just stories, nothing more. The Zorveni Empire, for all its power, ignored these whispers. They were confident that nothing could challenge their dominance. They laughed at the idea of humanity being a threat. It was an old myth, a story meant to entertain children, nothing more. Their fleet was unbeatable, and their military strategies were flawless. The galaxy had known peace for so long, no one questioned the balance of power. However, the Zorveni Empire was about to make a mistake they would regret. One day, a lone Zorveni scout ship, carrying only a few soldiers, left the Empire's homeworld to explore the farthest reaches of the galaxy. The mission was simple: check out the quiet planet known as Earth. It was supposed to be a routine mission, something no one expected to cause any trouble. They would confirm that the rumors were just stories and report back. Nothing would stand in their way. As the ship entered Earth's atmosphere, the crew members didn't think twice. They expected the planet to be full of primitive creatures, weak, defenseless, and easily controlled. They landed in a remote area, planning to make contact with the humans and see what, if anything, they could gain from this world. But as they stepped off the ship, they realized something was wrong. The air was different, the land was quiet, and then they saw it. A group of humans, armed with nothing but tools and a fierce will to survive, had surrounded them. The Zorveni soldiers raised their weapons, but they quickly realized they were outnumbered. These humans weren't weak. They weren't helpless. They were organized, resourceful, and prepared to fight for their world. A quick battle broke out. The humans, despite their lack of advanced technology, were fast and clever. They used the environment to their advantage, trapping the Zorveni soldiers in a series of clever ambushes. The Zorveni were surprised by the humans' tactics, never expecting such resistance. The fight was short but brutal, and by the time the Zorveni soldiers tried to retreat, they had lost a good portion of their team. As the scout ship scrambled to take off, the humans watched them go. They hadn't won a war, they had only defended their home. But the Zorveni Empire had learned something that day. They had learned that humans were not as weak as they thought. They had learned that humanity would not go down easily. And that was only the beginning. The Zorveni Empire was known for its strength. They had conquered countless worlds, and their fleet was feared across the galaxy. No one could match their power, or so they thought. The Zorveni rulers, confident in their victory, dismissed the humans as nothing more than a myth. They believed that their scout ship had simply run into a small group of Earth's primitive creatures. No one thought much of it. But they were wrong. The truth about humanity was about to hit them like a hammer. A few days after the first failed encounter, the Zorveni military was still laughing off the idea of humans as a threat. The scouts who had returned from Earth told their superiors about the strange encounter, but the leaders of the Empire simply shook it off. A few primitives with clever tricks, they said. Nothing to worry about. The Zorveni were already thinking about their next conquest, another star system to add to their empire. Earth was far off their radar, barely a blip in their grand plans. But then, something strange happened. Zorveni ships began disappearing from the galaxy. It wasn't just one or two ships, it was dozens. Entire fleets sent to nearby systems were lost without a trace. There were no signs of battle. No distress signals. Nothing. Just empty space where once mighty Zorveni warships had been. The Empire's leaders were puzzled, and then terrified. The first reports came from a star system close to the one where Earth was located. The large fleet was sent to investigate the missing ships, but when they arrived, they found only empty space. No wreckage, no survivors, not even a single damaged ship. The fleet's commander, a seasoned officer named Captain Jorax, had never seen anything like it in his career. He called for reinforcements, but when the second fleet arrived, they too vanished. The Zorveni leaders were stunned. How could this happen? Who or what could destroy so many ships without leaving a trace? Whispers started to spread through the Empire. Could it be the humans? They asked. But no one wanted to believe it. The humans were just a myth, right? Captain Jorax was sent to Earth with a massive fleet to find answers. This time, the Zorveni Empire was not going to make the same mistake. They would be prepared. They would bring their full force, enough to crush any resistance that might be left on the planet. The humans would be destroyed, and the myth would be put to rest once and for all. As the fleet entered the solar system, they detected no signs of life on Earth. The planet seemed quiet, still, almost abandoned. The Zorveni commanders felt a strange unease as they approached the planet's surface. The humans had disappeared, right? But then, as they began to descend into Earth's atmosphere, things started to go wrong. The fleet's sensors went haywire. Communications were jammed. Ships were losing power, their engines suddenly sputtering. The Zorveni couldn't understand what was happening. The planet was supposed to be primitive. How could they have advanced technology capable of such interference? Suddenly, from the shadows of the dark sky, the first signs of trouble appeared. A fleet of human ships, small but fast, came out of nowhere. They moved with surprising precision, surrounding the Zorveni fleet. The humans didn't wait to be attacked. They attacked first. Their weapons were primitive compared to the Zorvenis, but their speed and cleverness made them dangerous. The Zorveni were caught completely off guard. They had underestimated the humans. The first Zorveni ship exploded in a fiery blast. It was quickly followed by two more. The humans had used their environment, Earth's atmosphere, to their advantage. They fought in a way no one had expected, a combination of clever strategies and high-tech traps. The Zorveni fleet was in chaos. Captain Jorax tried to regroup his forces, but it was too late. The humans had already taken out several of their ships. Panic spread through the fleet. The humans, once thought to be weak and primitive, were proving to be anything but. They fought with the fury of a species determined to survive, using everything they had to destroy the invaders. The Zorveni Empire, the most powerful force in the galaxy, was being humiliated. By the time the Zorveni realized what was happening, it was already too late. Their fleet was retreating, their pride shattered. They had lost more ships in one battle than they had in hundreds of years of conquering worlds. The humans had shown them something they couldn't ignore: a fierce will to fight, an unbreakable spirit, and a surprising strength that no one had predicted. The galaxy began to hear the stories of what had happened, and the whispers, the fear, began to grow. The Zorveni Empire, which had once laughed at the idea of humans being a threat, was now terrified. They realized too late that they had made a grave mistake. And the galaxy was starting to understand that humans were no longer just a myth. They were a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy had always been a place of order. For centuries, the powerful empires, like the Zorveni, ruled without question. Their fleets dominated the stars, and no one dared challenge their authority. But now, everything was changing. The shocking defeat of the Zorveni fleet at the hands of humans sent ripples throughout the galaxy. And soon, whispers of fear began to spread. It started small, just a few quiet rumors exchanged in dark corners of the galaxy. The first whispers were filled with disbelief. How could humans, a species that had never left their planet before, defeat the mighty Zorveni Empire? It didn't make sense. The Zorveni were known for their unmatched power, their advanced technology, and their ruthless tactics. Yet a small, insignificant planet, Earth, had destroyed an entire fleet. The galaxy struggled to understand what had happened. Some alien species, who had never taken humans seriously, now found themselves questioning their beliefs. Species that had once laughed at the very idea of humans being a threat began to wonder if they had been wrong. Maybe humans were more than just a story. Maybe they were something to fear. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, a meeting was called to discuss the strange events. The council members, a mix of powerful alien species, gathered in a massive room filled with holographic screens and data streams. Most of them had heard the news about the Zorveni defeat, but no one knew exactly how it had happened. The Zorveni had refused to reveal any details of the battle. They only gave one clear message: the humans are not to be underestimated. A few council members laughed at the idea, brushing it off as a fluke. Humans are weak. They have no real technology. The Zorveni must have made a mistake, one alien said. But not everyone agreed. There were others, smaller, less powerful species, that had begun to take the threat seriously. They had seen what humans were capable of. They had heard stories of humans surviving against impossible odds, of their strange resilience and stubbornness. These species had never been part of the great galactic empires. They had learned long ago to be cautious, to survive by staying out of the way of the powerful. And now, they were starting to believe that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The whispers grew louder. They spread from system to system, from planet to planet. Some species began to warn others about the danger of angering humans. They fought the Zorveni and won, they said. What if they come for us next? A few brave traders who had dealt with humans in the past also spoke up. They shared their experiences, describing how humans could survive harsh environments, how they were always willing to fight for what they believed in. They spoke of humans' ability to adapt quickly, learning new skills in a fraction of the time it took most other species. Humans are survivors, they warned. They are not to be underestimated. Soon, the news reached the farthest corners of the galaxy. Even species who had never encountered humans felt the tremors of fear. The stories were everywhere now, of humans fighting back with no advanced weapons, of humans using clever traps and unpredictable tactics that confused even the most skilled warriors. The galaxy, once full of confidence, was now beginning to shake. Back on Earth, the humans had no idea what was happening. They had only defended their planet, fought back against an invader that had underestimated them. But their victory had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, and the whispers only grew. The Zorveni Empire, still reeling from its loss, tried to keep the news quiet. They didn't want to appear weak to the rest of the galaxy. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The once feared empire now seemed vulnerable, and the galaxy was starting to take notice. The whispers of humanity's strength spread like wildfire. They'd reached powerful empires, ancient races, and peaceful planets alike. Some species decided to take action, sending ships to Earth to observe, to learn more about this strange new force. Others decided to wait and watch, unsure of what would happen next. Fear was growing in the hearts of the galaxy's leaders. How could they control a species like humans? They had never seen anything like it. The humans didn't follow the rules. They didn't play by anyone's standards. They were wild, unpredictable, and that made them dangerous. No one knew what they would do next, and that made everyone nervous. In the darkness of space, a new question was asked. If humans could defeat the Zorvani, who else might they challenge? The galaxy, once calm and orderly, now lived in the shadow of that question. The whispers of humanity's name had already spread far and wide. And now, the galaxy could only wait to see what would happen next. The galaxy had never been so tense. The whispers of humanity's surprising strength had reached every corner of space, and fear had spread faster than anyone expected. The powerful empires, who once controlled the galaxy with ease, were now uncertain. The Zorvani, once the undisputed rulers of the stars, had been humiliated by the humans. And as more species learned about the humans' bravery and fierce will to survive, they started to worry. Could Earth become a threat to them all? For the first time in centuries, the balance of power in the galaxy was in question. And in the midst of all the fear and uncertainty, one question echoed in the minds of every leader. What if humanity comes for us next? On Earth, things were changing too. The humans had no idea how much their victory over the Zorvani had shaken the galaxy. They didn't know the whispers had turned into real fear. All they knew was that their world was no longer safe. The Zorvani, after their crushing defeat, were not willing to leave Earth alone. They wanted revenge. It started with a message sent through the stars by the Zorvani fleet. The message was clear: surrender or face the full force of the Empire. It was a demand, not a request, and it came with the weight of the most powerful military force in the galaxy behind it. The humans had no choice but to respond. In the quiet halls of Earth's leadership, the decision was made. There was no turning back. They couldn't allow their world to fall under the control of the Zorvani, no matter the cost. Humanity had fought once to protect their home, and they would fight again. The war began. The first battle was fierce. The Zorvani fleet, more powerful than anything Earth had ever seen, arrived just outside Earth's atmosphere. They came with hundreds of warships, armed with devastating weapons capable of destroying entire cities in seconds. Their ships were faster, stronger, and much more advanced than anything the humans had. But the humans were not afraid. On the ground, Earth's leaders quickly mobilized their military. They had no fleet of their own, no massive ships ready to fight in the stars. But what they did have was determination. They used their knowledge of the planet, their technology, and their ability to adapt quickly. They turned Earth's cities into fortresses, hiding weapons in places the Zorvani would never expect. The humans didn't have the firepower to go toe-to-toe with the Zorvani's mighty ships, but they had something more valuable: the element of surprise. As the Zorvani ships began to descend, the humans launched their first strike. It wasn't a huge attack. There were no massive battleships or fleets. Instead, the humans used small, fast ships, hidden in Earth's atmosphere, suddenly darting out from behind buildings and mountains. The Zorvani never saw them coming. The first few hits were devastating. Earth's homemade weapons, simple by comparison, managed to penetrate the shields of Zorvani ships. It was a surprise attack that sent shockwaves through the Zorvani ranks. The humans weren't supposed to be able to do this. They weren't supposed to stand a chance. On board the Zorvani flagship, Captain Jorax, who had survived the first disastrous battle, screamed in frustration as the human ships cut through his fleet like a knife through paper. "What are they?" he demanded. "How are they doing this?" The humans had learned quickly, and their fighting spirit was stronger than ever. They adapted on the fly, working together like a well-oiled machine. They didn't have the huge numbers the Zorveni had, but they had something more: unity. Every human, from the highest generals to the youngest pilots, fought as one. They knew this was a fight for survival, and they weren't going to lose. In space, the battle raged on. Zorveni warships tried to regroup and retaliate, but the humans kept pushing back, using guerrilla tactics and surprise strikes. The Zorveni were confused, out of their element. This wasn't a battle they could win with strength alone. The humans had turned the battlefield into a maze where every corner hid a new trap. The war had begun, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Back in the galaxy's heart, the other species watched in disbelief. The mighty Zorveni were losing to the humans. It was unthinkable. No one had ever seen a species rise up so quickly, with such strength and determination. The galaxy had thought it was safe, that the powerful empires would rule forever. But now, that safety was shattered. The humans were no longer just a myth. They were a force, and that force was now challenging the entire galaxy. The Zorveni weren't prepared for this kind of war. They hadn't expected the humans to fight back with such ferocity. And as the first battle of the war ended with a surprising victory for Earth, one thing became clear: the humans weren't going to stop. They would fight for their survival. And they would make sure that no one would ever forget their name. The Zorveni Empire never expected Earth's response to the war. After their humiliating defeat, the Empire's leaders thought they could easily crush the humans with their superior firepower. But what they didn't understand was that humans were not like any other species they had ever encountered. They didn't give up. They didn't surrender. They fought back. The first victory had been a surprise. The humans had used their knowledge of Earth's environment and their quick thinking to strike the Zorveni when they least expected it. But now the war was escalating. The Zorveni had sent reinforcements, their greatest warriors and most powerful ships. They were not going to let Earth's small fleet stand in their way. But the humans were ready. On Earth, the people were united. Every man, woman, and child knew what was at stake. They were fighting not just for their survival, but for their future. Every city had become a battlefield, with the humans using everything they had to fight off the invaders. From high-tech weapons to makeshift traps, nothing was left to chance. The Zorveni may have had advanced technology, but the humans had something stronger: their will to protect their home. General Morgan, one of the leaders of the human resistance, stood at the front lines, watching the sky light up with flashes of fire. Her face was calm, but inside, she knew the weight of the battle. She had led Earth's military forces into countless skirmishes, but this was different. This was a war for their very existence. "We won't let them take Earth," she said, her voice steady but fierce. "Not today. Not ever." The soldiers around her cheered. They were ready. They had been trained for this moment, and they had learned from every battle. Their tactics had evolved quickly, and now they knew how to strike hard and fast, always staying one step ahead of the Zorveni. In space, the battle had become a war of attrition. The Zorveni fleet had suffered losses, but they were still powerful. Captain Jorax, who had survived the first wave of attacks, was more determined than ever to crush the humans. He had underestimated them before, but now he was focused. He had seen firsthand how quickly the humans could adapt, and it made him more cautious. "We will not let Earth stand in our way," he said, staring at the massive fleet of ships. "Prepare for the final assault." The Zorveni launched a full-scale attack on Earth's defenses, sending wave after wave of ships to destroy the human resistance. Their ships fired powerful laser beams, capable of turning cities into rubble. But the humans had learned how to defend against them. Earth's fighters, small but fast, darted through the skies, dodging the blasts and striking back with precision. In the streets, human soldiers used their environment to their advantage. They set up traps, lured Zorveni troops into carefully planned ambushes, and fought with a ferocity that caught their enemies off guard. The Zorveni expected humans to cower before them, but what they found was the opposite. The humans fought like warriors, driven by the belief that their planet was worth protecting. In the heart of the battle, the humans made their boldest move yet. They had developed a new weapon, one that could change the course of the war. It wasn't as powerful as the Zorvani's advanced weaponry, but it had the potential to destroy their ships. It was a risk, but it was their only hope. General Morgan gave the order to launch the weapon. It was a massive device, built from pieces of Earth's own technology, combined with the lessons learned from their previous battles. As the weapon powered up, the sky above Earth shimmered with energy. The Zorvani fleet, still circling above, did not see it coming. The weapon fired. The first blast hit the closest Zorvani ship, and it exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The shockwave ripped through the fleet, sending ships tumbling out of control. The humans had done it. They had struck a blow to the heart of the Zorvani invasion force. But the Zorvani weren't going down without a fight. Captain Jorax ordered his fleet to regroup and retaliate. The humans' victory was short-lived as the remaining Zorvani ships fired back, unleashing their fury on Earth's defenses. Yet, the humans stood strong. They had fought back once, and now they would do it again. In the aftermath of the battle, Earth's cities were scared. But they were still standing. The humans had taken their first blow, but they had dealt one right back. The Zorvani were starting to realize that this war would not be as easy as they had first thought. The humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting for their home, their families, and their future. As the battle raged on, one thing became clear to both sides. The war was far from over. The humans had proven that they would not back down. They had fought back with everything they had, and the Zorvani were now faced with an enemy unlike any they had ever seen before. The galaxy had underestimated Earth once, but it would never make that mistake again. The war had raged on for months, but humanity had shown no signs of backing down. Earth's cities were battered, the skies filled with the smoke of battle, and the ground shook with the force of every new attack. But despite all this, the humans held their ground. They were fighting harder than ever, and each victory, no matter how small, gave them the strength to keep going. But now, the Zorvani were preparing for their final assault. After months of losing ground, they had regrouped, bringing every last ship in their arsenal to Earth's doorstep. Their forces were overwhelming, and they were determined to crush the human resistance once and for all. They had underestimated humanity in the past, and they were not about to make that mistake again. General Morgan stood on the command deck of Earth's Central Command Center, looking out at the large screen displaying the approaching Zorvani fleet. She had seen the destruction they were capable of, and she knew this would be the hardest fight yet. The humans had fought with everything they had, but now the Zorvani were bringing their full power to bear. "We can't let them win," General Morgan said, her voice filled with resolve. "We've come too far to lose now." The soldiers around her nodded, their faces hard with determination. They had already lost so much, but they weren't going to let Earth fall. They were ready to give everything, even their lives, to protect their home. In space, the battle was already beginning. The Zorvani ships launched wave after wave of devastating attacks on Earth's defenses. The sky above was filled with flashes of light as lasers and missiles collided. The humans had fought with incredible bravery in the past, but this time, the Zorvani were pushing them to the edge. "We need more time," one of Earth's commanders said, watching as their defensive lines began to crumble. "We can't hold them off much longer." General Morgan glanced at the clock. Time was running out. But in the chaos of battle, she had one last hope. Earth had developed a final weapon, one that could change the course of the war. It was a risk, a last-ditch effort, but it was their only chance. "We launch it now," General Morgan ordered. "It's the only shot we've got." The weapon was called the Reaper, a device that harnessed the power of Earth's greatest minds. It wasn't fully tested, but if it worked, it would be powerful enough to cripple the Zorvani fleet and force them to retreat. But if it failed, it could destroy everything. As the humans made their final preparations, the Zorvani pressed their assault. The enemy's fleet was closing in, their ships firing relentlessly. The humans' defenses were falling apart under the constant bombardment. General Morgan could see the devastation in her mind, knowing that every second they wasted brought the humans closer to losing everything. At the last possible moment, Earth's final weapon was launched. It rose into the sky like a great fireball, soaring toward the heart of the Zorveni fleet. The Zorveni ships had no idea what was coming. Their attention was fully focused on the humans, and they didn't see the weapon until it was too late. The weapon hit the Zorveni flagship with a massive explosion. The force of the blast ripped through the ship, sending shockwaves through the entire fleet. The Zorveni flagship, the symbol of their power, was obliterated in an instant, and with it, the rest of the Zorveni fleet began to crumble. It was a devastating blow, one that no one saw coming. The Zorveni fleet, once invincible, began to retreat, broken and disorganized. The humans had struck the heart of the Empire. And now, the tide of the war had shifted. General Morgan watched the battle unfold on the screen, her heart racing. The weapon had worked. Against all odds, humanity had delivered the final blow. The Zorveni were retreating, and Earth had won. The humans celebrated, but the victory was bittersweet. So much had been lost in the fight. Cities lay in ruins, and countless lives had been sacrificed. But in the end, Earth had stood strong. They had fought back, not just with weapons, but with the strength of their will. As the last of the Zorveni ships retreated, General Morgan stood tall. She had seen the cost of the war, but she had also seen the resilience of humanity. The humans had proven that they were not to be underestimated. They had fought for their home, and they had won. "We did it," General Morgan said, her voice filled with pride. "Earth is safe." But she knew the galaxy would never forget this war. The Zorveni had been defeated, but the humans had shown something far greater than military strength. They had shown the galaxy that no matter how small a species might be, no matter how impossible the odds, they could still stand against the most powerful forces in the universe. And the galaxy would never whisper humanity's name in fear again. Now, it would be whispered in respect. The war was over. The Zorveni Empire, once the most powerful force in the galaxy, had been defeated. Their fleet had retreated, broken and scattered, their pride shattered. Earth had survived, and humanity had proven to the galaxy that they were a force to be reckoned with. The victory was hard-earned, but it was a victory that would echo through the stars for centuries to come. However, the true impact of humanity's strength was just beginning to unfold. The Zorveni had been only the first of many to underestimate Earth. They had come to conquer, to crush a small, young species that hadn't yet made its mark in the galaxy. What they found instead was a species willing to fight with everything it had, a species that would not bow to anyone, no matter how powerful. In the months following the war, the whispers about humanity spread. The galaxy had always known about Earth, but it had been seen as insignificant, a primitive world far from the centers of power. But now, the galaxy was beginning to realize something far more terrifying. Humanity was not weak. They were strong, resourceful, and willing to fight to the death to protect what they loved. Across the stars, the news of the humans' victory reached every corner of space. The Galactic Council, once certain of its control over the galaxy, now found itself on edge. The humans had defeated the Zorveni, and if they could do that, what else were they capable of? On every planet, from the mighty Calorex to the distant Sahari, leaders began to speak of Earth with caution. The stories of the war spread like wildfire. The once mighty Zorveni, who had crushed entire civilizations with ease, had been forced to retreat by a species they considered inferior. If the humans could defeat them, then no species was truly safe. And that was something no one could ignore. Among the stars, the fear was palpable. There were whispers in dark corners, hushed conversations between old allies. Would humanity come for them next? The Zorveni had learned the hard way not to underestimate Earth, but the rest of the galaxy was now grappling with a new reality. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Humanity was a wild card, unpredictable and fierce. General Morgan stood before the Earth Council, the room silent as the weight of what had happened began to sink in. The humans had won, but the victory came with consequences. No longer could Earth simply live in peace, unnoticed by the larger powers of the galaxy. Humanity had made its mark, and now the galaxy would remember them. "It's not over," General Morgan said, her voice calm but heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. "The Zorvani have been defeated, but the galaxy knows our name now. We've made our enemies, and we've made our allies. We need to be ready for what comes next." The members of the Earth Council nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. The war had ended, but a new era had begun. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They had earned their place among the stars, and with that came both danger and opportunity. In the far reaches of space, the other empires watched Earth's rise with growing concern. They knew that humanity's victory had sent a clear message. The galaxy was no longer a place where the strong could bully the weak without fear of retaliation. The humans had proved that they could fight back, and that knowledge spread like wildfire. It wasn't just the Zorvani who were worried. The Xari, an ancient species known for their stealth and cunning, began to reconsider their approach to Earth. The Korath, a race of warriors who had conquered countless worlds, looked at humanity with a mix of fear and curiosity. The universe had changed. The humans had changed it. The galaxy, once a vast and mostly peaceful place, was now filled with tension. It was no longer a place where the powerful ruled unchecked. Earth had disrupted the balance, and now every species had to ask themselves the same question: what happens when humanity comes for us? The humans had proven that they were capable of anything. They had fought and won against the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. And now, they were a power to be reckoned with. The galaxy would never see Earth the same way again. The humans had made their enemies, and they had made their allies. But most importantly, they had made their mark, and the stars would remember. In the years to come, the story of humanity's rise would be told across the galaxy. From the peaceful worlds to the war-torn planets, everyone would know the name of Earth. It would be whispered in both fear and respect. And the galaxy would never again underestimate the power of the species willing to fight for its survival. As General Morgan looked out at the stars, she knew that the future of humanity was uncertain. But one thing was clear: Earth had proven that it could stand against anything. And in the heart of the galaxy, that was a truth that no one could ignore. In the heart of the galaxy, the Galactic Council sat together, a powerful group made up of different alien species. The room was filled with whispers of tension. The Council had been discussing something serious for days, something that would change the future of the galaxy. The topic: humans. For many years, Earth had been a distant planet, isolated from the rest of the galaxy. Most of the Council members had never even heard of humans. They were a small, primitive species, living on a blue planet, with little power or influence. At least, that's what they thought. The truth was, they were wrong. The story of humanity was spreading across the stars. Some alien races had begun to notice strange things happening on Earth. They noticed that humans, despite their small size and lack of advanced technology, had managed to survive everything. They had lived through wars, natural disasters, and even near-extinction events. Time and time again, humanity had shown one thing: an unbreakable will to survive. The Council, however, didn't see this as a strength. They saw it as a potential threat. The aliens in charge were afraid. They were afraid of the unknown power humans might have, even if they hadn't fully realized it yet. What if humanity's will to survive wasn't just a survival instinct? What if it was something far more dangerous? What if humans could be the galaxy's most powerful force? This fear spread quickly among the higher-ups. The Galactic Council couldn't take any chances. So in a closed-door meeting, they decided humans would be banned from joining any galactic war. The announcement came suddenly. It was not meant for the public. It was not meant for humans to know at all. The decision was made quietly, behind closed doors, and the council kept it secret. They hoped the ban would be enough. After all, who would want to fight in a war if they weren't even allowed to participate? But what the council didn't know was that this decision would change everything. On Earth, humans had no idea they had just been banned. They were still living their daily lives, exploring their own solar system, and reaching out into space. In the quiet corners of the galaxy, whispers of this strange decision began to reach the ears of curious aliens. Why had the council banned humans? What was so special about them? Some races, unsure of the decision, started to look deeper. They began to wonder if there was more to the story than the council was letting on. One such race, the Excelenians, were not afraid of humanity. They were curious and bold, with no intention of following the council's order. They decided to take matters into their own hands. They sent a message to Earth, asking to speak with a human diplomat. The Excelenians were known for their diplomatic skills, and they believed they could learn more about the humans directly, rather than from rumors or council lies. The humans, unaware of the ban, gladly accepted the invitation. They sent a young, intelligent diplomat named Kayla to meet with the Excelenian ambassadors. Kayla, a calm and strategic thinker, was excited about the opportunity. She had no idea she was walking into a situation far more dangerous than she imagined. The Excelenians had their doubts about the council's decision, and they hoped that meeting with a human would give them the answers they were looking for. When Kayla arrived on the Excelenian world, she was greeted with curiosity. The Excelenians were not what she expected. They were tall and graceful, with shimmering blue skin and long flowing tendrils. They had a reputation for being wise and peaceful, but their sharp eyes showed they were not easily fooled. Kayla spoke with them for hours. She shared humanity's story, explaining Earth's history of survival and peace. She spoke about human resilience, how humans had fought through countless challenges and emerged stronger every time. The Excelenians listened intently, fascinated by the diplomat's calm, rational approach. Kayla had no idea she was slowly changing their view of humans. They were beginning to see the truth. Humans were not weak, as the council had believed. They were clever, adaptable, and incredibly strong in ways no one had expected. However, the council's decision weighed heavily on their minds. The Excelenians didn't want to risk angering the Galactic Council, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they had been wrong about humanity. They began to wonder, was the council's fear of humans based on something real? Or was it simply the result of the council's own insecurities? As Kayla continued to speak, the Excelenians realized that humans were far more than just another species. They were a wild card in the galaxy, and they could be the most powerful force the galaxy had ever seen. The meeting ended on uncertain terms. Kayla left with a sense of unease, knowing something was wrong but unable to figure out what. The Excelenians, on the other hand, were left with one important question. Should they tell the council what they had learned, or should they keep the truth about humanity a secret? But the council's decision had already set the stage for a future none of them could predict. The ban had been put in place, but what would happen next? Only time would tell. The Galactic Council's decision to ban humans from galactic war was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning. While the council thought they had dealt with the problem, they hadn't realized something important. Humans had secrets, secrets that no one in the galaxy fully understood yet. On Earth, the humans were still unaware of the ban. Life on their planet continued as it always had. People went about their daily routines, studying, working, and exploring space. But in the background, something extraordinary was happening, something that would soon shake the entire galaxy. Unbeknownst to the Council, humans had been preparing for something big. Earth's space programs were not just about exploration anymore. They had become training grounds for the toughest minds and most skilled soldiers. The humans had always been resourceful, able to make do with what they had. But now, their scientific advancements and military strategies were evolving at a rapid pace. The Council had no idea how quickly humans were developing, and that was about to become their biggest mistake. Across the galaxy, a few alien races had started noticing strange patterns, small details that didn't add up. They realized humans were not just surviving. They were thriving in situations that should have destroyed other species. One alien race, the Drakari, a species known for their sharp intelligence and curiosity, decided to investigate further. They sent spies to Earth to learn more about the humans. What they discovered was both shocking and dangerous. The Drakari spies reported back that humans had an incredible ability: adaptability. Humans were able to learn, grow, and change in ways that no other species could. Where other species relied on their natural strengths, humans relied on their minds. They had developed advanced technology, but it wasn't their tech that made them dangerous. It was their creativity, their drive to solve problems, and their will to never give up. Humans had fought in wars before, but they had always found new ways to win. Where other species fought with their strength and their weapons, humans fought with their brains. They knew how to turn the odds in their favor, even when the situation seemed hopeless. They didn't just rely on traditional warfare. They used tactics that no one else had ever thought of. The Drakari were not the only ones noticing these strange abilities. The Excelinians, the race that had invited the human diplomat, also began to study the humans more closely. They found that, in addition to their intelligence, humans had a deep-rooted instinct to protect their home and their people. They would stop at nothing to defend Earth, even against overwhelming odds. But the most surprising thing the Excelinians discovered was something no one had seen before. Humans had a hidden power, one that was more dangerous than any weapon. They had an inner strength that came from their emotions: love, fear, anger, hope, and they used these feelings to fuel their actions. When a human felt passionately about something, they would move mountains to achieve it. This emotional drive made humans unpredictable, and in war, that was the most powerful weapon of all. The Excelinians had never seen anything like it. They knew that if humans were ever allowed to join a galactic war, they could shift the balance of power forever. The idea of allowing such a powerful species into the galaxy's military was terrifying. It would be like unleashing a force of nature that no one could control. As the Drakari and Excelinians continued to learn more, they began to question the Council's decision. Had the Council banned humans out of fear, or was there something more to their power than the Council realized? The two races began to share their findings with one another, secretly exchanging information. They both agreed that humanity was not a threat because of their weapons, but because of their minds and hearts. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humans continued their progress. A few scientists had begun to experiment with new forms of energy and weapons, but their focus was not on destruction. They were building technology that could solve problems, not just fight wars. However, there was one key thing that humans had learned during their wars. They were survivors. And as they learned, they became stronger, smarter, and more dangerous with every passing day. Human leaders, though unaware of the galactic concerns, knew something was shifting. Their people had become stronger, more connected, and more ready to face challenges. What they didn't know was that they had become a symbol of something much bigger than themselves, a symbol of hope, resilience, and change. And in the galaxy, hope was the most dangerous power of all. The Drakari and Excelinians, growing more worried, realized that the real danger wasn't the human military or their weapons. It was the human spirit. The ability to fight, adapt, and grow stronger in the face of impossible odds was something no one had ever fully understood. The Galactic Council had banned them, thinking they could control humanity's future. But in doing so, they had unleashed something that would be impossible to control. Now, as more alien races began to notice these strange human traits, the galaxy was on the edge of a new chapter. The Council's fear of humanity's potential would either lead to a new war or a new alliance. The question was, Would humanity's hidden power bring them together, or tear the galaxy apart? The Galactic Council had made their decision. Humans were banned from joining any galactic war. They believed this would keep the galaxy safe from an unknown power they feared. But deep down, the Council knew something wasn't right. There were whispers among the stars, aliens who didn't fully trust the Council's judgment. Among them were the Exelinians, the species that had met the human diplomat, Kayla. The Exelinians were not like the other races in the galaxy. They were curious, open-minded, and above all, they'd valued understanding over fear. After their meeting with Kayla, they were left with a troubling question. Was humanity really as dangerous as the Council thought? Or was there something more to them? Something worth exploring? The Exelinians had always prided themselves on their ability to see past the surface, and they couldn't shake the feeling that the Council's ban on humans was a mistake. After all, humans were not like the other species in the galaxy. They weren't just fighters. They were thinkers, survivors, and problem solvers. The Exelinians began to wonder if the Council was too quick to judge. It didn't take long for the Exelinians to make their decision. They had to find out the truth for themselves. They decided to invite humans to a private meeting, a chance to speak directly with the best of what humanity had to offer, a chance to see if humans were as dangerous as the Council feared or if they could be something more. They needed a representative, someone who could show the galaxy what humans were really capable of. Kayla, the same diplomat who had met with the Exelinians before, was chosen to return. The Exelinians believed she was the perfect person to represent humanity. She was calm, intelligent, and had already shown them that humans were not just driven by power, but by reason and empathy. Kayla, though uncertain of why she had been chosen again, agreed to the meeting. She still didn't understand why humans were banned from the Galactic War, but she was eager to find out more about the galaxy's true feelings toward humanity. The meeting took place on the Exelinian homeworld, a peaceful planet covered in vast, glittering lakes and lush forests. The alien leaders waited for Kayla to arrive, and when she did, they'd welcomed her with open arms. The atmosphere was calm and warm, a sharp contrast to the tense, secretive meetings of the Galactic Council. Kayla, though nervous, stood tall. She had no idea what the Exelinians were really expecting, but she was determined to prove that humans could be trusted. As she sat down with the alien leaders, she began to speak. She shared Earth's story, talking about the human struggles and their drive to survive no matter the challenge. She explained how humanity had faced near extinction, but through sheer willpower had built a thriving civilization. The Exelinians listened closely. They were struck by Kayla's calm but passionate words. She didn't try to brag or boast. Instead, she spoke honestly about her people's strengths and weaknesses. She told them about human resilience, the ability to adapt and learn quickly in the face of adversity. She talked about how humans could take on challenges that seemed impossible, often using nothing more than creativity and determination. As the conversation continued, the Exelinians began to understand that humans weren't just another race to be feared. They were something entirely different. Humans had an incredible potential that no one had fully realized. They were not only capable of surviving, they could thrive in the harshest conditions. The Exelinians were beginning to see the truth. Humanity wasn't just a danger to the galaxy. They were a powerful force that could change everything. After hours of discussion, the Exelinians made an unexpected decision. They decided to give humanity a chance to prove itself. The Council had feared what they didn't understand, but the Exelinians saw something else in humans. They believed that humanity's hidden power could be used for good. They offered Kayla a deal. If humanity could prove that they could bring something valuable to the galaxy, something beyond just survival, then the Council would have to listen. Kayla was stunned. She hadn't expected this kind of response. The Exelinians were offering humanity a chance to show what they were truly capable of, without the fear and suspicion that the Council had held. But there was a catch. The task ahead would be difficult. The Selenians wanted humanity to prove that their strength wasn't just in fighting, but in leadership, in diplomacy, and in problem-solving. Kayla accepted the challenge, knowing that the future of humanity in the galaxy could depend on this moment. She left the meeting with a renewed sense of purpose. The Excelenians had given her a chance, but now it was up to humanity to prove they could be more than just a dangerous force. They had to show the galaxy that they could use their power wisely. As she returned to Earth, Kayla knew the stakes were high. The Council still had its doubts, and the galaxy was watching. But humanity was ready. They had always been ready. All they needed was a chance to prove it. The chance to prove humanity's worth had been given. The Selenians believed in humans, but now it was time for Earth to show the galaxy what it was truly capable of. Kayla, still carrying the weight of the task ahead, returned to Earth with the message. A challenge that could either lift humanity to new heights or destroy their reputation forever. When Kayla arrived back on Earth, she was met with confusion and curiosity. The human leaders didn't fully understand what had just happened. The Excelenians had asked them to prove something, but what? And how? The details of the task were unclear, but the one thing Kayla knew for sure was this. Humanity had a unique strength that no one in the galaxy had seen yet, and it was time to unleash it. As the world prepared for whatever came next, Earth's brightest minds gathered. Scientists, military leaders, and diplomats all came together to figure out how they could demonstrate their true potential. What would the galaxy want to see? Would it be a display of military strength? Or would it be something else? After weeks of brainstorming and planning, a team of humans came up with an idea that could prove humanity's worth. It wasn't about technology or weapons. It was about something far more powerful: human creativity and adaptability. Humans had always been able to take seemingly impossible situations and turn them around. It was time to show the galaxy how humanity could solve problems like no other species. But there was one problem. The Excelenians had specifically asked for something that would prove humans weren't just survivors. They wanted to see if humans could become leaders, creators, and thinkers in a way no one else had ever imagined. This is where Earth's best and brightest minds got to work. They quickly realized that if they were going to succeed, they would need to create something that could change the course of galactic history. A weapon, not of destruction, but of creation. It would need to be something that could reshape the very nature of war and conflict. The team of scientists and engineers worked day and night, pouring all their knowledge and resources into the project. The idea was simple: design a system that could heal instead of harm, solve problems instead of escalate conflicts. They were going to create a device that could turn the tide of war, not by fighting, but by ending the need for it altogether. They called it the human weapon. At first, many of the team members were unsure. Could such a device really work? Could humanity build something that would change the galaxy's entire approach to conflict? The doubts were real, but as the project advanced, the team began to see it taking shape. The human weapon wasn't a machine of destruction. It was a network, a system, designed to identify conflicts before they could start, to find peaceful solutions, and to connect the minds of all the different species in the galaxy. It would use human ingenuity to find new ways to cooperate, to bring about peace without war. The moment of truth came quickly. The Excelenians were watching, waiting to see if humanity could really prove that they had something the galaxy had never seen before. The device, a massive complex of interconnected systems, was ready. Now, the humans needed to show it in action. Kayla stood before the leaders of the Excelenians, holding her breath. This was it. If the human weapon worked, the galaxy would have no choice but to see humans in a new light. If it didn't, humanity's future in the galaxy could be doomed forever. The demonstration began. A series of carefully selected alien species were brought together to test the device. The goal was simple: put them in a situation where they had to work together, solve a problem, and use the human weapon to reach an agreement. The tension was high as the aliens, wary of humans, were skeptical of any solution that didn't involve weapons or force. But something incredible happened. As the system came to life, it began to analyze the situation. It identified each species' concerns, their strengths, and their weaknesses, and then it provided them with a platform to communicate. The human weapon didn't just push for a solution. It created an environment where the aliens could listen to each other, understand each other, and cooperate. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. For the first time, species that had been in conflict for centuries were coming together, talking, and finding common ground. The Selenians watched in awe. The human weapon had done what no other species could have achieved. It hadn't forced a solution. It had encouraged cooperation and communication. The galaxy had always relied on weapons to settle disputes, but humans had shown them a new way. They had created something that didn't destroy. It built. Kayla smiled as she saw the reactions of the Selenians. This was humanity's greatest strength, the ability to think differently, to create solutions instead of just reacting to problems. The Selenians were impressed, and they weren't the only ones. Other races, watching from afar, were beginning to understand the truth. Humanity was not just a survivor. They were creators, innovators, and thinkers in a way no one had ever expected. The demonstration had proven something clear. The galaxy needed humanity, not just as a fighter, but as a partner, a leader, and a force for peace. The human weapon had changed the course of history. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they could be more than just a threat. They could be the future. The human weapon had worked beyond anyone's expectations. Kayla and the Earth leaders stood before the Selenians, watching as they marveled at what humanity had created. It was a moment of triumph. The galaxy was beginning to see humanity not just as a species to be feared, but as a species with the potential to change the very nature of conflict. But just as hope seemed within reach, a shadow began to form on the horizon. Something no one had seen coming. A new threat, far greater than anyone had anticipated, was lurking in the galaxy. And this threat didn't care about diplomacy, peace, or cooperation. It only cared about power. The first warning signs came when an alien fleet, unlike any other in the galaxy, appeared on the outer edges of the known space. It was massive. Hundreds of ships, each one larger than the largest dreadnoughts humanity had ever built. The ships were dark, their hulls almost blending into the blackness of space. No one had ever seen anything like them before. The fleet hailed the Galactic Council, but there was no greeting, no message of peace. Instead, their message was clear and terrifying. Surrender or face destruction. The alien race calling itself the Valdric was unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. They were ancient, ruthless, and powerful. The Valdric had spent millennia conquering planets, wiping out entire civilizations, and growing stronger with every victory. Their ships were not just weapons. They were living, breathing entities, capable of self-repair and growth. Their technology was advanced, far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Galactic Council immediately called for a meeting. Representatives from every species gathered to discuss the threat. But the mood was grim. The Valdric had made it clear they would not stop until they had control of the entire galaxy. The Selenians, who had once believed that humanity's strength lay in its creativity and peaceful solutions, now realized that the galaxy needed more than just diplomacy. It needed strength, military strength. The Valdric were not interested in discussions or treaties. They wanted to dominate. Kayla, who had been part of humanity's push for peace, now found herself in an entirely different situation. The message from the Valdric was a wake-up call. Humanity had been preparing to prove its value as peacekeepers and creators, but now it was clear that war was inevitable. The galaxy was in danger, and humanity would have to take up arms once more. The Selenians were the first to speak. "We will not be able to stop the Valdric with words alone," their leader said, looking around the room at the assembled species. "We need fighters. We need a united force. And we need the one race that has shown it can survive the impossible." The room went silent as every eye turned to Kayla. The humans had shown their value in diplomacy, but now they had to prove themselves in war. Kayla felt a weight settle on her shoulders. She had always hoped humanity could avoid war, but the Valdric were not a force that could be reasoned with. The galaxy needed soldiers, soldiers who could fight, adapt, and survive no matter the odds. And there was no race better suited for that than humanity. Within days, the human military began preparing for the greatest war the galaxy had ever seen. Earth's best soldiers, engineers, and strategists worked together to develop new weapons and tactics. The human weapon, designed for peace, was reworked into something more lethal. It wasn't just a tool for solving problems. It was a system that could turn the tide of battle. As the Valdric fleet approached, the human forces stood ready. They knew this would be a fight unlike anything they had faced before. The Valdric were not just strong, they were relentless. Their ships could regenerate, their weapons were devastating, and they fought with a single purpose: to conquer. But humanity had something the Valdric didn't: resilience. They had always been able to survive the worst situations, to adapt and overcome. Now, humanity had to use that strength to defend not just their home, but the entire galaxy. The battle began with the Valdric unleashing wave after wave of attacks, their ships tearing through defenses like paper. But humanity was ready. The new human fleet, though smaller, was faster and more agile than the Valdric expected. The humans used their creativity and adaptability to outmaneuver the Valdric ships, striking where they least expected. The war was brutal. The Valdric were powerful, but humanity was relentless. For every ship lost, the humans fought back harder. They used their ingenuity to turn the tide of battle, creating traps and strategies that the Valdric couldn't predict. The Valdric, who had conquered countless worlds, were now facing a species they couldn't understand: humans who refused to give up. As the war raged on, the galaxy began to realize something. The Valdric were not invincible. They were strong, but they were not unbeatable. And humanity. Humanity had something no other species had: the will to fight, no matter what. Kayla, watching the battle unfold from Earth, knew one thing for certain: humanity had just proven its worth. Not through diplomacy or peaceful solutions, but through their strength, their resilience, and their unbreakable spirit. The galaxy had underestimated them before, but now they would see just what humanity could do when pushed to the edge. The Valdric were powerful, but they were not ready for the fight humanity was about to give them. The war had begun, and the Valdric were relentless. Their ships tore through the galaxy, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. They were strong, powerful, and seemingly unstoppable. The other species of the galaxy watched in horror as entire fleets were destroyed in a matter of hours. But as the galaxy fell into despair, humanity stood tall, refusing to give up. Kayla watched the events unfold from Earth, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what was at stake. The Valdric were not like any enemy humanity had ever faced before. Their ships were alive, capable of self-repair, and their weapons could annihilate entire cities with a single shot. But Kayla knew one thing for sure: humanity had always found a way to survive the impossible. This would be no different. Back at the front lines, human soldiers, pilots, and engineers were working around the clock to develop new tactics and strategies to fight the Valdric. The war was unlike anything they had imagined. The Valdric were relentless, their ships seemingly invincible, and their forces were everywhere. But humanity had something the Valdric didn't: adaptability. Human commanders began to rethink everything they knew about warfare. They couldn't match the Valdric strength with sheer power alone, so they had to outthink them. The key was surprise, agility, and the ability to adapt in the heat of battle. The first major counterattack came when humanity's fleet, led by General Jackson, used the Valdric's own weapons against them. The Valdric ships were powerful, but they weren't invulnerable. Human engineers had figured out a way to hack into their communication systems. For a brief moment, the Valdric were caught off guard. General Jackson ordered his fleet to split into smaller, faster groups, attacking the Valdric ships from all angles. It wasn't a full victory, but it was enough to make the Valdric pause and reassess. As the humans continued to fight back, the galaxy began to take notice. The Valdric, who had assumed they would crush humanity without any resistance, were now facing a challenge they hadn't expected. Humanity was outsmarting them. Human tactics were unorthodox, unpredictable, and hard to counter. The Valdric ships, while powerful, were not designed to handle the guerrilla warfare humanity was now using. On the ground, human soldiers were doing their part. Armed with the latest technology, they fought with a ferocity that surprised even their allies. The Valdric soldiers, though strong and deadly, were not prepared for the sheer determination of humanity. Every battle was a fight for survival, but the humans kept pushing forward, knowing that the fate of the galaxy depended on them. Back on Earth, Kayla spoke to the human leaders, urging them to keep fighting. "We are showing the galaxy who we really are," she said. "The Valdric may be strong, but we are stronger. We won't back down." And the humans didn't. They kept fighting, using every resource they had. They created new weapons, developed new technologies, and improved their tactics every day. The war was far from over, but the tide was beginning to turn. The Valdric were no longer the only ones making advances. Humanity was adapting faster than anyone thought possible. Then, in a bold move, humanity's fleet launched a surprise attack on the Valdric flagship, the largest ship in their fleet. The Valdric flagship was thought to be invulnerable, its armor nearly impenetrable. But humanity wasn't focused on brute force. They had learned from their mistakes. Instead of attacking head-on, they waited for the right moment. General Jackson's fleet moved quickly, using the galaxy's natural obstacles to stay hidden until the last possible moment. They struck hard, targeting the weak points in the Valdric ship's defense systems. The battle was intense, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But in the end, humanity's tactics paid off. The Valdric flagship was heavily damaged, and its crew was forced to retreat. The victory was small but significant. For the first time, humanity had dealt a serious blow to the Valdric. The galaxy's forces, who had been watching in silence, now saw that humanity was not just a species to fear. They were a species to respect. Kayla received word of the victory. She felt a surge of pride for her people. The Valdric may have been a powerful enemy, but humanity was showing that they could fight back. They could adapt, survive, and even win. This was the moment the galaxy needed to see. But the war was far from over. The Valdric would not give up easily, and humanity still had a long way to go. Yet in this moment, there was hope. The galaxy had seen humanity's strength, not just in battle, but in their ability to think, to change, and to never give up. As the battle raged on, one thing was clear. Humanity was no longer just a species in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Valdric had underestimated them once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The war was finally coming to an end. The Valdric, once thought to be unstoppable, had been forced to retreat. Their fleet was in tatters, their flagship destroyed, and their forces scattered across the galaxy. It had taken everything humanity had to reach this point, but they had done it. They had fought back and won. Kayla stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, looking out at the vastness of space. The stars seemed brighter now, almost as if the galaxy itself was breathing a sigh of relief. The Valdric were gone. But even as humanity celebrated their victory, Kayla knew the true work was just beginning. The battle had been won, but the war had left scars. Planets had been destroyed, entire populations wiped out, and trust between species had been shattered. The galaxy needed healing, and humanity, once seen as a small, insignificant race, now held the key to that healing. As the leaders of the galaxy's surviving species gathered for a peace conference, Kayla stood at the center of the room. The Exelinians, once the first to doubt humanity's strength, now looked to them for guidance. They had proven that their creativity, adaptability, and determination could overcome even the greatest threats. But now they had to prove that humanity could also bring peace. The peace conference was tense. Old grudges between species ran deep, and the wounds of war were still fresh. But Kayla felt something she hadn't felt before: hope. The galaxy had seen humanity fight back, had seen them push through impossible odds and emerge victorious. Now, humanity had the chance to show the galaxy that they could be a force for good, not just in battle, but in rebuilding what had been broken. "We have proven ourselves in the hardest way possible," Kayla said, addressing the gathered leaders. "But we have also shown that we can rebuild, that we can adapt to the needs of the galaxy. We are not just warriors. We are creators, healers, and leaders. Together, we can make this galaxy stronger than ever before." Her words were met with a silence that stretched across the room. The species of the galaxy, once wary of humanity, now listened intently. The Selenians nodded, and the other leaders murmured their agreement. Humanity's victory had earned them respect, but now they would earn the galaxy's trust. The first step toward peace was forgiveness. Species that had once been bitter enemies now had to find common ground. Kayla watched as representatives from different races, some who had fought against humanity, others who had fought beside them, came together to discuss how they could move forward. It wasn't easy, but humanity's example had shown them that it was possible. The new beginning didn't happen overnight. It took years of work, of rebuilding shattered alliances and creating new ones. The galaxy was still recovering, but with each passing year, the wounds of war began to heal. Humanity, with their unique ability to adapt and rebuild, led the way. They helped replant forests on war-torn planets, rebuild cities destroyed in battle, and reconnect fractured societies. Earth itself had changed. No longer a planet hidden in the far reaches of the galaxy, Earth had become a symbol of hope and resilience. The humans had earned the respect of every species, not just through their strength, but through their ability to rebuild, to think beyond the violence of war, and to strive for a better future. As humanity took on more leadership roles in the Galactic Council, they began to guide the galaxy in a new direction. The old ways of endless war were being replaced by dialogue and cooperation. Humanity, the species that had once been banished from the galaxy's wars, was now leading the charge for peace. But Kayla knew that the galaxy was never truly safe. New threats would emerge, as they always did. But humanity was ready. They had proven that they could survive, adapt, and fight for what was right. And more importantly, they had proven that they could bring about a new era of peace and unity. As the galaxy moved forward, Kayla stood at the front of a new beginning. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, the galaxy had hope. Humanity had shown that they could be more than just a species fighting for survival. They could be the leaders the galaxy needed. And as she looked out at the stars, Kayla knew that this was only the beginning. A new chapter had been written, one where humanity played a central role. The galaxy had seen the strength of Earth's people, and now they would see their hearts, their creativity, and their ability to build a future worth fighting for. Humanity had come a long way, but the journey wasn't over. It was just beginning.